I want to read you something from one of the sharpest political thinkers I know, one of my dear friends. It says, quote, "The electorate has long had reason to assume that both major parties were mature and responsible policy-making entities, their philosophical differences notwithstanding. The actions of the Republican Party over the last decade have made it abundantly clear, though, that it is time to reevaluate that assumption. The current iteration of the GOP is indifferent to the substance of governing. It's disdainful of expertise and analysis. It's hostile toward evidence and arithmetic. It's tethered to few, if any, meaningful policy preferences. It does not know and does not care about how competing proposals should be crafted, scrutinized, or implemented. The modern Republican Party has become a post-policy party." That comes from a new book called The Impostors, How Republicans Quit Governing and Seized American Politics. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show Steve Benen, who is the author of this book, who is one of my dear friends, and who is the person who has had more influence on my thinking as an American writing about politics than any other person in this country. Steve, congratulations on the book. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I know that talking on television is your least favorite thing in the world, maybe. And so I appreciate you making the exception here. But I do feel like the book makes me retroactively make sense of the last 3 years in a way that I was not able to before I read the book. And I also feel like you are sort of offering the cure to those of us who are so bewildered by the fact that Trump doesn't seem to have any interest in governing or policy at all. Your thesis is basically that this is not a Trump problem. This is a Republican Party problem that started to emerge during the Obama presidency, and that Trump is just the natural outgrowth of that. Can you explain that part of your thesis?
Sure. After the Bush-Cheney era, I think Republicans found themselves at a crossroads. The party had been rejected by voters. Democrats had just won 2 wave elections in a row. And in general, I think the electorate had largely turned against everything that Republicans had stands for. And so Republicans had to decide what would their priorities be? What would their goals be? How would they function in the coming years? And they had to decide in a hurry. Ultimately, I think they made the wrong choice. What they did was they said, we were going to give up on the very idea of even having an agenda. The Republicans will just define themselves by their opposition to whatever Obama was for, even when Obama agreed with them. And so we had 8 years of what was effectively governing nihilism from the Republican Party, even when they were in the majority in the House, even when they were in the majority in the Senate. And that, I think, paved the way for the Trump era, because what we saw from Donald Trump as a candidate was a post-policy candidacy, and then a post-policy transition period. And now we have 3+ years of a post-policy presidency.
What is the dynamic, though, that continually drives the party further in that direction? Because what you're describing is a very specific form of radicalization. You hollow out any interest in governing, any ability to even work on legislation. You have this great anecdote, which I did not know before reading your book, which was that when Mike Pence was in senior leadership in the House in 2009, he sort of led the way in firing all his legislative staff and replacing them all with messaging people, with communications people. I mean, that sort of almost literal hollowing out of what they're supposed to be as lawmakers is radical, but there's definitely some imperative that's pushing them to go further and further in that direction as fast as they can. Is there reward that they're getting in this sort of feedback loop that's pushing them consistently in this direction?
Governing is hard. It's time consuming. It requires hours and endless, unglamorous work. And I think Republicans have had to make a choice between being pundits and trying to seek and acquire and maintain power, or rolling up their sleeves and doing actual meaningful policy work. And they ultimately seem to have come to the conclusion that it's vastly easier to be pundits than policymakers. And because they've been rewarded for that, because they've won multiple election cycles, they've been put in positions of authority at the state and federal and local levels, they felt no need to change that dynamic. And that's one of the reasons I think that the coming election cycle and the one after that and the one after that will be so important. Parties change when voters tell them that they have to change.
Usually, you would expect the feedback loop when we've got real crises as a country to be rewarding people who have solutions for those problems. I mean, that's how it should work in normal terms. Do you have faith that this next election will be defined along those lines?
It's hard to have faith. I saw something interesting this morning. I went to Joe Biden's campaign homepage, and I went to Donald Trump's campaign homepage. And I looked at Joe Biden's issues page to see what was there. And there were 37 plans and blueprints and outreach to various constituencies to let everyone know that if Joe Biden was elected, here's what he would do with power. And then I went to Donald Trump's page to look for the issues page, a comparable page, and it did not exist. There is no issues page there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, maybe we can replace that with the Republican platform, except that doesn't exist either. They are simply just taking the 2016 platform and slapping a sticker on top of it that says 2020. And so with that in mind, it looks to me like we're stuck in the same feedback loop insofar as Republicans still don't seem to have much of an interest in governing. But that said, Republicans are losing. And with that in mind, I think that it's likely that we'll see voters say that they expect more and that this is an opportunity for them to remind Republicans that the current post-policy path isn't good enough.
Steve Benen, producer on this show, dear friend of mine, author of the new book, The Impostors, How Republicans Quit Governing and Seized American Politics, which comes out officially in 2 hours. Steve, congratulations, my friend. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.